Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Nisha Singla and this is part 2 on React useState hook. In our previous video, we have already covered about the basics of states and props and how they are different from each other. And we have also covered like how we can use states inside functional component with the help of useState. So if you haven't covered that video yet, I strongly recommend to watch that one before proceeding with today's session. And if you are visiting my channel for the first time, please make sure to subscribe the channel and press the bell icon so that you get notified for my next upload. Now let's get started. In our previous video, we have created a very simple state of type string and we changed this title on the click of button. So when I click on this, initially the state is good morning, and as soon as I click on that button, I'm changing the state to good evening. So this session will cover advance of useState and will cover other ways of using it in our project. And this is very important because states are something which we are going to use in most of the components. So it's very important to understand all the possible ways of using useState so that you don't feel or you don't struggle to work with useState in your functional component. So if you remember, in the previous session we have created this useState, right? And we have used string here. So if you remember our class-based component where we used to declare a state with the help of this dot state, and we will always use object here. But now in functional component, you are not restricted with object only. useState hook can hold any type of data. It can hold string, it can hold boolean, object, array. So string type we have already covered, but when you handle complex structure, then you need to use other type as well. So let's cover those in this session. So the first type is Boolean type. So now let's see how we can use Boolean type in a state. And this is one of the most used one, right? For an example, suppose we want to display a loading feature in our application. So what ideally we do? If you are making an API call, then you wait till the time your data is not, received from the server. So meanwhile, you should not display blank screen to the user, right? So that time we need to display loading screen. And once you get the data, then you should display the data. So here, what we are doing, we are toggling the screen true and false. Or whenever you want to do some conditional rendering, there also we can use this Boolean type. So I'll keep this session very simple and let me quickly create another component. And here I'm giving it a name of loading.js. Let me quickly write this boilerplate code. You can use extension to write this code. You don't need to write again and again. I'm writing so that you can also remember the syntax. If you're learning ReactJS, then I always recommend that you should type yourself so that you remember the syntax. And first we need to make sure that this component is loading fine. So you need to move to app.js file because there as of now we have comment component, and here we have to import now our loading component. So that first we can make sure that our component is loading fine. We can comment this comment and here we can use our loading component. Save the changes, and here you can see useState hook with Boolean type. So here you can see useState hook with Boolean type. So it is rendering my component fine. We can make this heading as h3. So now let's see how we can use a Boolean type, right? So we all know how to create a state. You just need to use useState here, and you need to give a variable here and a function that will help you to update your state and useState. And here you decide what type of state it's going to be, right? So as I told you, it would be a Boolean type. So initially you can decide whether you want to make it a true or false. So maybe initially the loading is false. So now exactly what I want to do, I want to do some conditional rendering, like when this is loading is true, I will use ternary operator. Is loading true means still I am fetching the data. So at that time I need to display this loading, and if is loading is false, then I want to display my component. So as of now I'm not creating any separate component. Here only I'm typing something like data will display here. So this conditional rendering I have done based on my state. So initially the is loading is false, right? So this will become false. So it means loading is loading is false. So it will display this one. Data will display here. And if I say true, then it will display loading here, right? So it means I'm toggling the state true and false. So this comes handy in lots of situations. So as of now it is taking only one state. We have to update the state based on user action. So we don't have as such any API call in this code. So what we will do, we will toggle this state based on a button click, right? Because we have to call this function to modify this state. If it is a true, then you have to say false. If it is false, then we have to say to true. So now with this set loading function, we have to modify the state of is loading from true to false and vice versa. So let's have a button on this screen. Now this button will call set loading. So now in this set loading, we have to update this is loading. So what we can do, whatever it is inside this is loading, let's set the opposite of that. If true, then false. Then if false, then true. Save the changes and you can see here. So initially is loading will hold true, and as per this is loading is true, then it will display this one, and that's what we are getting. As soon as I click on this button, it will call my set loading function, which will update the value of my state, right, as a opposite. So when I click on this one, you will notice data will display here. If I again click on this one, it will again toggle the state. So this way you can use Boolean type. So this is how you can use Boolean type in your state. One point to remember, like as we know that states are asynchronous. So we cannot make sure that every time you get the correct state here, right? So one practice that you need to do, never update your state like this. If your new state is basically dependent on the previous state, because here my new state will completely depend on my previous state. If is loading is false, then I have to set to true, and if it is previous state was true, then I have to set it to false. So it means my new state is dependent on my previous state. So as of now it is working, but you cannot make sure that it will work in all scenarios because the behavior of states is asynchronous. So wherever you are updating your state based on the previous state, then first you have to grab the previous state and you have to perform your action on that. You should not modify it like this. So how you should update your state based on the previous state? In that case, it will take a function which will give you the previous state, and here now you can return the new state based on this previous state. At this time it will make sure that you always get the updated previous state value. So whatever you have in the previous state, set the opposite of that. It's not mandatory to give it a name as previous state all the time. It's just a variable name. You can give it any name. It looks more readable, right? Output will remain same. There will be no change in that. So this is the another point here, how to update a state based on the previous state. So in that case, your function can also hold a callback function. So this is how you can use Boolean type with useState. Let's talk about the another type that you can use this inside this useState is object, and this is again one of the most common type that we use, right? When you handle any object, there you can use this type as a object type. So let me quickly create another component. I can quickly write the same boilerplate code. You can write or you can copy from the previous code as well. So we have this basic form ready, and again we have to call that user form from here. So we can comment this loading form and we can display this user form. Save the changes and just to make sure everything looks fine. Now let's talk about this user form. Objects is again very quite common, right? When you handle any form there, maybe you want to hold the detail in an object form, right? So in that case, your state can also be of type object. And for that, let me quickly create a very basic form that will display just a username and password, and I will show you how you can hold that form data in an object. This is very important because we have to use that, right? So quickly I can create one basic form. I will not design a beautiful UI for the form. It's just to show you a demo here. So when you see it on your browser, we have this form, and just to and let me put a BR as of now here, just to bring it to the next line. So now what I want that whenever I click on this username and password, I need to hold this information in an object, so that maybe further that object I may want to pass to a backend server, or I may want to add it in my collection. That is a secondary thing, but first I need to hold this detail in an object. So how we can do that? So in that case also we need to use state, but this time the state will be of type object. So let me quickly create a state. Maybe I will create a state this time with the name of user, because we are holding user detail, and here the handler for that will be setUser. And this time this useState will be an object. As of now you can pass empty object, or you can have a basic structure of user object inside this. It's totally up to you. Maybe you want to initialize it with some basic structure, then you can also pass the object here. As of now this object is empty. And just for the readability, I am creating a p tag where I am just displaying it as a JSON data on the UI, so that we can see what exactly it is returning. So I can use json.stringify, and whatever I have in the state, I'm just displaying it on the browser so that we can see how our state is updating. So initially the state is empty. Okay. So now what I want, as soon as I type something in this text box, that information should hold inside a object, that is my user object, which will create two keys, one with username and the another one is a password. So if that basic structure you need, so you can also do something like this, that username is empty as of now and password is also empty. And you can pass this one as a initial object. So if you notice here, I'm getting initial state as username and password, and the values are blank. So now to update my state, I need to have a handler here, right? So now I have to add onChange event here that will allow me to update the state. So as soon as I do some change on this text box, I need to update my state. So for that I have added this onChange event. Now I need to pass a handler. You can pass directly this setUser and you can modify the state, but if you want to make it more cleaner, I recommend to have a function here. That function will be a handler for me, and inside this function I will call this setUser to update the state. And I will not create a separate handler for every onChange. The same handler I'm going to use for the password as well. So whenever there is any change in any of the field, this handle change function is going to call. And now in this handle change, I need to call my setUser to update the state. And now here the magic is, you need to make sure how you are updating the state. Okay, let me show you how to get the data from this text box. We all know we have this E object here that give me the complete reference of that DOM element here. And if I give you just simple e.target.value and move to a browser, open this developer tool, you can see we are getting it inside this E. And same, if I say name here, this will give us this name. So you can see the name is username. So these two keys I need to use. So let's use this setUser and let's update the state. SetUser is a function. Now as this state is of type object, so it means setUser will also take an object. And what you need to do, we need to create a key. So we'll say e.target.name and set its value as e.target.value. Okay, because we have to create a structure like this. So this will give me username and this will give me the value which I'm typing on the text box. Save the changes and back to your browser. Just pay attention here. Initially the state is empty, so as soon as I type something here, you can notice it is updating my username. Where is my password key? Okay, let me type here something, password. You will notice now my username key is gone. So this is not the correct way of updating your object. So here what is happening, it is deleting my previous keys from the object. Ideally we have to make sure that you copy the existing state, okay, and we don't want to overwrite it. So for that, first of all you have to copy the previous state and then you have to update your value. So in that case you just need to make sure that you are doing something like this. With the help of spread operator, first I am copying my complete state that I have inside this user, and afterward I am updating the particular key. So initially I have empty key, but I have both keys. Now let me update username. So here you can see it is not overwriting my complete object. It just first copying the complete object or complete state, and then on that state it is updating only username, and same rule will go for password. You need to update your object. This is very common problem most of the time people do when they are on the very initial stage of learning React, Angular, any framework, right? You have to make sure that you are updating your object properly. Otherwise you will accidentally, overwrite your data. So I hope this concept is clear. So this is another type that you can use object inside a useState. Now let's talk about the last type, that is again most frequently used one, and that is array, right? So when we talk about a collection, right, we have to handle the array. Suppose you are handling users list or customer list, they will always be of type array of objects. So your state can also hold array. So again, let me quickly create a array type, and here I am giving it a name of users only, okay? This will hold a list of user, and quickly I am creating a boilerplate code. So I have this basic structure ready. Now in the app.js, again I need to import that. Let's validate it on UI. So it is rendering fine. So now let's talk about how you can use array inside a state. As of now I don't have any data, so I'm just creating a variable that will hold my users list that would be of type array. And inside this maybe I have some users. So I can have a ID and name. So I have two users, but here this is the array of object. Now what I want to do, I want to create a screen where I want to add a new user to this user list. Okay, let me first create a simple UI for that. Again I'll create a form, and here I will have a label that will say add user. And just to keep it very simple, I will have a basic form here. So when you check it on your browser, we have add user tab here. So now whenever I add a new user, I need to update my state. So where is the state? So first step is we have to create a state. I'll create a state with the name of users, and it will have a method of set users, and this use state will take initial state as users list. Okay. So now we have users list, and there is nothing on the screen. Okay, so I will not create any table format just to display it on a UI. To keep it simple, again I will use json.stringify so that we can see whether it's adding new users or not. So let's see what is inside this user state. So you can see initially it has two users in the list because we have initialized our state with the help of user. So initially we have initialized our state with the help of users list, which is holding this object, array of object. Now whenever I add new user, I need to update my users list with the help of this set user. The rule is same, okay? We have to add an event here. So earlier we use on change, right? You can have it on change as well, or you can have a button to update the state, but this time I'm using a different event, and that is on blur. As soon as you leave the focus from text box, then only this handler is going to be execute. Unnecessary, I don't want to run my state for every on change. So for that also I will use something like this. I will have a function here. Maybe I will create this one with the name of update user list, and this function I can create here. I told you how to get the data from the form. You can say e.target.value, right, or name. So you can also pass from here directly, or you can use the same approach that I have discussed in the previous example of object type. Let me show you a different way of passing it. From here directly I can say e.target.value. Name also you can use, but name we don't need, right? So in this case it will just hold new user. Let me show you whether you are getting it or not. So if I say new user, save the changes and open your console tab. So as soon as I type a new user here, you can see nothing is displaying on console because I have added on blur. On blur says that when I press tab, it will come out from this text box. Only then that event will be triggered. So that is on blur. So when I say on blur, now you can see we are getting from line 12 new user as Nisha and line 12. So it means this is holding the new added user. So this user I just need to give to this set user. Okay, that's all we have to do. So for that, what you can do, I can call this function set users, and as it is an array, so it will hold array. But again, you have to update your object in an immutable way so that you by mistake you don't overwrite the previous two objects. Okay, because the same problem will happen if you directly update a new object but don't first copy the previous added users. So for that, again you have to use spread operator and first make sure that you have copied your previous objects inside this set users, and then only you add a new object because we are adding individual objects now, right? And this object has two key, ID and name. Name I have in this new user variable. And what to do with this ID? You can use some random methods here. You can use the random function just to generate some unique ID, or as of now what I can do, I can create a new ID based on the users.length. So let's check this one. So initially I have two users. Now let me add another user and press tab. So here you can see a new object has been added to my array. And similarly you can add n number of users in this one. So this is how you can use array inside useState. Most of the things are same, you just need to make sure that you are updating your state correctly in an immutable way so that you don't overwrite your complete object. Okay, just make sure that you have copied your previous object. So we have covered pretty much every type of type that we can use inside a useState, and if you do practice, all type will make sense and it would be very easy to use. So this is all about today. I hope now you understood the concept of useState and how you can implement that. And just to make it 100% sure that you are understanding it, in the next video I will create a very small sample app so that we can use state inside that project and we can practice it. So see you in the next video. Till then, take care and bye bye.